generations did not know better, right? Our parents, our grandparents, right, were just trying to survive, right? Their parents before that, I'm sure, never told them that they loved them. One day, my aunt calls me and she's crying and she's like, and I'm like, are you okay, Tia? Like, what's going on? And she's like, oh, she's crying. I'm like, are you okay? Like, is this an emergency? Like, I'm scared. She's like, oh, mi pa me acaba de llamar y me dijo que me quiere mucho por la primera vez. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, her dad called her saying, you know, like, I love you for the first time ever. And she is a grown woman. She is like 52.
Bienvenidos de nuevo a su podcast favorito, Lecciones de Vida. My name is Bridget Hurtado, and I am beyond excited to be back on this podcast where we take a deep dive into the heart of the Latino community and how it resonates with our community, right? And along my side, I have my amazing co-host, Elisa Fonseca.
Hola, gracias, Bridget. My name is Elisa. I work with mental health. I'm really excited to be here with you guys today. We're gonna cry, we're gonna laugh, we're gonna experience everything, and today we have a really vulnerable topic.
Yeah.
So I would like you to introduce yourself and tell me a little bit more.
My name is Rosa Reyes, and I'm an elementary school counselor, and I actually have the opportunity to do my program in English and Spanish.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. My name's Edward Guerrero. I am a social worker in the LA County jail system. So I get to work a lot with crisis and forensics.
Yeah, well, welcome. So, yeah, like Elisa mentioned, we're going to take a deep dive and embark on a mission, on a journey of vulnerability and triumph and resilience. And I think the most important thing here is when we start talking about these topics that are taboo or stigmatized, we not only heal ourselves, but we empower others to do the same, right? So agárrense, ¿ya estamos listos? Pero before we get started, ¿qué es el stigma? ¿Qué es el taboo? Especially in the Latino community.
So for me, stigma is putting a label in someone's. Like, regarding mental health, would be like loco, loca, you know, like I'm just going to therapy, or you have something wrong. So it's basically like putting a stigma in someone's forehead. That's how I see it.
Sí, y tabú es no hablamos de eso. We don't talk about it. You know, oh, you're going to therapy, or las cosas que pasan en la casa se quedan en la casa. Whatever is going on in our household, nobody else needs to know about it, right? So, yeah, we're excited that you both are here joining us and ready to take on this conversation. So, we'll get started. You know, what is mental health to you? Or what does it mean to you?
Go ahead.
Okay. So for me, mental health is the first thing that comes to my mind is resources, right? Like mental health, what do you need? That's the first thing that comes to my mind, but also what you're struggling with, what brought you to this point, and what we're going to do better. So, and just to talk a little bit about the stigma, it is something que es muy negativo, que de eso no hablamos, but as we're growing up, you know, and especially us that we're in the field, we know our own family members that have been struggling for years, and why don't they seek the help? Because it's negative. The stigma behind it is just so negative. For example, when I was growing up, I would internalize a lot of things, right? And, you know, I would have moments where I could not regulate myself, right? Like I'm yelling at my sister, I'm yelling at my mom, or I'm having disagreements. Why? Because I don't know how to communicate. That's still part of mental health. Or like I would break out crying and my family would say, what's wrong with you? You know, it's always what's wrong with you, not how can I help you?
Algo está mal.
Sí, algo está mal. ¿Por qué estás así? No tienes razón para llorar, right? All of that negativity. And it wasn't until I was older already, I would say like I was in my senior year or in college where my parents, I got to a breaking point and they're like, okay, yeah, like, you know, maybe she does need some support. And being able to communicate, I need help to a Latino parent is very difficult because why can't you do it by yourself? And, you know, you do everything else by yourself. You should be able to do this too. So just the negativity behind it, I think, is really tough.
I agree. I think something my mom would always say is, I'll give you a reason to cry. Like, estás llorando, yo te voy a dar una razón para que llores. Like, you have, it's not valid why you're crying right now, you know? Like, I'll get the chancla and I'll, you know.
And also I feel like it's part of you are thinking too much.
Yeah.
Get something different. Vete a limpiar. You know, vete a, I don't know, like do your homework, anything, pero it's just your mind. Just distract yourself. Like it's going to just go away.
Yeah.
Like miraculous is going to wait.
And those are the magical words. Ay, piensa en otra cosa.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, mental health is, your well-being, and like you mentioned, we're all going to struggle. We're all going to have these moments of crying, of outbursts, of anger, but your ability to get through it, your ability to manage and keep yourself composed, right?
Yeah.
But I had another point. I forgot it.
It's all
But
good.
but what I was gonna say is, like I said, we all go through a lot of things, and I think growing up sometimes too with your parents, it's like, well, we've had it worse, or your
Yes.
ancestors had it worse,
100%.
grandparents had it worse. They had to come to this country. For me, my grandparents had to come to this country, and what do you think they went through? And now you have everything you need, and you're able to go to college and play sports and do all these things, but sometimes your mental health isn't there. How are you gonna cope with the situations that you're experiencing? And some of that is, I heard something recently, with every level of success is a new level of demon, right? Who's trying to get at you. And sometimes I think people don't understand that when you're reaching a new level of success for your family, and your family members don't understand that, because there's new levels of demons that they just don't understand, because they didn't have to experience it. They had experienced other things, right? So when it comes to mental health, for me, it's very much grounding myself and how am I going to get through this? Like, my ancestors did go through a lot. The generations before me went through so much to get me here to this point, or to bring our family to the U.S. But being able to push those borders where they never thought our family would be able to go, and keeping yourself calm through it.
Yeah, and
Pressure.
how do we bring that validity to our experiences, right? Because I feel like a lot of the times, specifically in the Latino community, they're so dismissive, right?
Yes.
Whenever I tell my parents I'm feeling X, Y, and Z, they're like, pues yo caminaba por el cerro. I would go to school with no shoes, and I went through the coyote. Like, you don't know what it took for me to get here. So it's so dismissive. It's like, oh, you're crying over that. Like, let me tell you what you should be crying over.
And I think also that nos quita las ganas, like, de decir what is going on.
Yeah.
Because, like, if I know my parents will be like, what are you crying about? Like, that's ridiculous. You'll be like, okay, so I'm not going to say anything, because why should I say anything?
And I think that's why a lot of us struggle with emotions and talking about what we're feeling, because as a child, like, that's where that generational trauma comes in, right? It's like, if we are dismissed so oftentimes as a child, when we grow up, we suppress these emotions and feelings, and then when we get older, we're like, why do I feel this way? We don't even know how we feel.
How do I manage my emotions?
How do we label an emotion?
Labeling too. I think it's the biggest thing. Identifying what is it that I'm feeling, and then how do I move past that if I don't even know what it is that I'm feeling.
I think a big thing having to do with that just takes me back is, everything has to be a lesson, right? And just like you both said, it's like, well, I had it worse, right? But they're making our problems little. But, how do you want me to express myself without yelling? Or how do you want me to express myself without crying when, number one, you never taught me to express myself. You taught me to be quiet and sit there while you tell me something, And it's such a different thing because, I'm screaming and I'm crying because I don't know what else to do. You're going to tell me, think about something else, right? And then when we get older, it's just, well, you have an attitude. Well, I do have an attitude because every time, the only way you listen to me is when I yell, right? That's the only time you're giving me space to be me or tell you what's going on. Right. And I feel so restored and kind of like healing myself through my job because I'm teaching these little kids, the tiniest of tinies, how to express themselves, what their emotions are, and giving them someone to listen to, and I think that has done so much for myself and being able to give back, number one, to my Latino population, and healing myself. So I think it's very restorative, all of it together. And I think this is why we do what we do.
Absolutely.
And that segues us into why are there these beliefs, right? These cultural beliefs and societal norms around mental health. What creates them? Where do they come from? Why are they still here? I know we're trying to break these barriers and trying to overcome. We're working with the littles in elementary school to have them identify their emotions, something that we didn't have that growing up. So what are your thoughts on that?
I would say our generation, older generations did not know better. Right? Our parents, our grandparents, right, were just trying to survive, right? Their parents before that, I'm sure, never told them that they loved them. For example, my dad, once his dad was really sick, and one day my aunt calls me and she's crying and she's like, and I'm like, are you okay, Tia? Like, what's going on? She's like, oh, she's crying. I'm like, are you okay? Like, is this an emergency? Like, I'm scared. She's like, oh, mi pa me acaba de llamar y me dijo que me quiere mucho por la primera vez. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, her dad called her saying, you know, like, I love you for the first time ever. And she is a grown woman. She is like 52. And I was like, wow, like, this is insane, you know? And so when I hear that and she's crying, I'm like, okay, so that tells me what happened with my dad, right? And like the generation before them too, like there's no connection, and it's just, now we're creating that connection because we know we missed it. We know our parents missed it. Absolutely. So I think in creating that, we're getting rid of the stigma and just talking and healing. And, you know, like we've said, it starts with us. And I think that's where the negativity comes from. Like, you don't need it, you don't need it, you don't need it. Until someone is crashing and burning, they're like, okay, maybe we need it now. Like once it gets too bad, they're like, okay, now it doesn't matter about the stigma. Now you're going to get the help you need. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of that is built in.
Yeah, so kind of picking back off of that, I worked in a psych hospital for a year and a half, like I was telling you, in intake. So we're having people come in and their worst moments, you know, they were suicidal, frequently homicidal. They were just going through psychosis. They were experiencing psychotic breaks or drug induced. And so seeing a lot of that, I think for me, I saw firsthand how this was the first time a lot of these people were getting mental health help for the first time, right? It's like, how do you, there had to be so much before this moment that I met you that you feel like ending your life, that this could have been prevented, that you could have sought help. And a lot of them obviously are, you know, Latinos, especially where we live. It's just the demographic, but you see so many, and then you see their moms crying or siblings crying, or on the opposite. Sometimes what I would see was really sad was he's just being drama. They're being dramatic. The person is being so dramatic. Why are they acting like this? You know, why are they think this is the biggest deal ever? And I don't even know why he's saying this stuff when I have this, you know, patient who is crying their eyes out, saying that they want to kill themselves, and with a whole plan, intent, sometimes even a letter written. Like, this is very serious stuff that there are so many identifiers that I guess, you know, culturally we don't educate ourselves on or know about, I guess. Or we dismiss it so easily too. When it's somebody you love, you dismiss it like, oh, they'll be okay. They're a little sad. They haven't come out of their room for a couple of days, but they'll be okay. They're still coming out to eat or something.
I think also because of a stigma, sometimes we wait too long.
Yeah.
So in those situations, like los hospitales, las clínicas, they were being like that for a long time.
Right.
Yeah.
And just because what my family is going to think about me, am I going to be too crazy? Am I the only one feeling this way? Because a lot of things in mental health, we are like, I'm the only one feeling like this. Like, there's no way someone else is going to feel it the way am I feeling.
Or am I going to bring shame to my family because I'm feeling like this?
And then it's going to get out.
Exactly.
What are the Theos going to think? Are they they're all going to talk about me and my parents that we're crazy.
And then we wait a lot, and that's it. We're in a mental institution because we didn't want it to get help, like with a therapist before.
And I think that's where cultural norms and beliefs have a heavy play in mental health stigma, right? Because my parents separated when I was 14 years old. And I remember the first time my mom took us to therapy. So it was my mom, my little sister, and me. And the therapist, for the first time ever in my little childhood life, I was given a space to talk about how I feel without being shut down. So the therapista was like, so how are you feeling, little Bridget? And I was like, you know, like I feel this way. And the therapist gave some feedback to my mom, like, hey, this is what you can do better to build on the communication with your two daughters. My mom was livid. She's like, esta vieja no sabe nada. This lady doesn't know anything. We're never coming back to therapy. Like, you both don't know. Like, if I'm not showing that I love you, like, you're ungrateful. I'm your mother. Like, I moved you away. I'm doing this. I'm breaking my back. And after that, I was like, it all came back, right? Like, little Bridget can't talk about what's going on. And I think a lot of people in the Latino community, you know, that's where it's so knitly tied to these cultural beliefs. So it's like, how do we break those cultural beliefs? And I know Rosa touched on it a little bit, right? Like, destigmatizing it and going back to the elementary level and talking about it. So have you both tried to do anything aside from that in the field to, you know, build this education piece or this awareness or change that narrative?
Definitely, 100%. I think the first thing that I like to tell our families when they come to our schools is, I'm not a therapist. I'm a social emotional learning teacher, right? I teach you how to recognize your emotions, how to understand them, express yourself, and things like that. Not, okay, we're going to sit here and talk about your childhood traumas, because the families, I do think, are so terrified of, like, they're going to say something they're not supposed to, or like, les pego con la chancla, they're going to report me to DCFS, right? All of these things. But that's the first thing I want them to know. Like, I'm here to support you and do whatever your child needs. I'm not a therapist. And whatever we talk about, like, yes, it's private. But if I think there's something you need to work on, let's have that open relationship. And I think it's creating a good relationship with these families and with the students, of letting them know, like, we're just teaching them how to regulate their emotions. And I think a big part of that also comes from the education that we're able to provide to the parents, you know, and let them know, like, these are just a few things that we want to help you with. And inviting them, our biggest thing is inviting them to my classroom, like letting them see the space, and that it's not a threatening place, and that they're also welcome here. Giving them my Google Voice number, like, hey, you can call me whenever you need me, you know, that we're very close. And, you know, thankfully we do have parent workshops, and educating them through that. We actually have one tomorrow morning, and providing them with the tools, number one, that I wish we had when we were younger, but also that they're seeking now. They're asking for that help, and just teaching them everything that I'm teaching to the students in my classroom, so they know we have that connectedness, you know. And like we always say, like, education starts at home. Whatever our parents model to us, whatever we see, whatever our siblings are doing, we go and do that. So I think educating them and putting it, once again, in understandable language, where my school is a dual school, so having that material in Spanish, connecting the stories to them about my tia or my grandma or my mom, and having that connection, I think, is what is less threatening for them and more inviting. Because as we know, everybody's afraid of change. And Latinos are also afraid to ask for help, because what if they find out I don't live there, right? What if they find out that I am, you know, undocumented? What if this, and that? We live in a world of fear. And like you were saying, we're afraid to go to the clinica sometimes, because what if there's, you know, a police outside, right? We're afraid to seek this help because we've been taught, okay, if you stay under the radar, you stay hidden, nothing can happen to you, you know? And that's also part of it.
I love that you bring that up, because sometimes, or I oftentimes think that it's like that cultural norm or belief, but at the same time, it's accessibility, like accesibilidad, right? How accessible is mental health services to our Latino families, or our undocumented families, right? I have a lot of new students that migrated from another country, and how, like, they don't know where to acquire this information from.
And at the same time, it's hard. You're coming from a different country. You already know the rules or your mental institutions in your country, and then you come to a different language, a different country, different insurance, different everything, cultures, everything. So it's easier not to go. It's better be like, you know what, like, I can. How am I going to express myself in English? How, like, and that's things that I've been through that, the same thing, because I was telling you guys, we are not the same in English than in Spanish. So those things are also like barriers for the community.
You know, going off of that, I have seen the difference that it makes for my students who only speak Spanish, to have somebody there that can do counseling with them in their home language. Like, that means and changes everything, you know, like they feel that they belong, they feel that they're understood. And, you know, sometimes I sit there and I'm like, sabes la sensación cuando así, right? Like, and sometimes it's new for me or hard for me, because just the same way, just like you're saying, it's hard to express yourself in a different language. Having those words, those social emotional learning words, esas palabras socioemocionales, son difícil to translate perfectly to where it's not threatening. Oh, right, like, oh, es que está confundida, right? That has a certain connotation. Está confundida. ¿Por qué está confundida? ¿Por qué no puede decidir qué quiere hacer, right? Where, oh, she's just confused right now, she just needs a moment to think about it. It means so much, so many different things. So to be able to do that and share that with my Latino parents and say, like, ay, no es floja, right? Like, she's just having a hard time because she's thinking about these things, and it's taking up that space in her mind. So I think teaching them that aspect, will change so much.
And Edward, I know you're in a little bit of a different space. You're in that social work aspect of things. So how do societal norms and politics play into that?
Yeah, so it's a lot. I mean, like when I was working at the psych hospital, being able to, seeing a, for example, what a lot of people talk about in the settings I've worked in is seeing a grown man cry is something that's really hard to see because it's not common, right? So especially when we're coming into these very hard times, whether they are feeling suicidal or they're just coming in for intensive treatments. And seeing somebody cry, or a man cry, especially for me as a man, they get very timid, or they try to not, like the machismo stuff. And so then I've always really appreciated that I'm able to do is just let it out, bro. And I'll, bring it back to down basic language. I'm not trying to be a professional. I'm not a master's educated level guy when I'm with you. Just let it out, man. Let's talk about it. Yeah, let's talk about it, bro. What's going on? That's messed up. I don't know if I can cuss on there, but hey, that's some hard shit, man.
You know what? They probably never had that space,
Yeah.
But it's also regarding the stigma that men can cry.
100%.
Yes.
And we cry 100%. Too much.
Right.
So it's that things that they're putting in us.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Growing up,
Yeah. I wanted to ask you a question. What do you think about therapy?
I think it's great. I've been in it for many years before. And this is so wild. I actually have my new appointment on Thursday. Like, I took a break for a little bit, but I'm like, you know what? Therapy is always a little bit good for you, like just, there's always something you can work on. So
absolutely.
Thankfully, I'm very pro.
Yeah.
We're proud of you.
It's big, and therapy is very important. I did it for the first time in college when I was going through school, and then I think you just realize. I think you don't realize how much there is you can work on, and how much you have to get off your chest. And sometimes, I think in general, but especially as men, who we usually have those spaces to just talk and vent about our feelings, and then. Also, as a clinician, I think it's really important for us to go to therapy, because you get to understand what it's like in the other chair for a little bit, and then also when you're in that other chair, here's are some of the things that made me feel good when I was a patient, or when I was the person coming into the clinic. Here are some of the things that the clinician or the therapist did that helped me feel welcomed here. And for me, that really helped me going into being a therapist. I felt there was certain things that I really enjoyed about the therapist I was working with. There were some things that I wanted to change, that I wanted to maybe add, or just be myself. And so growing into that role for me was really important, doing therapy first. And it's very important for everybody, I think.
Yeah, I remember the first time I went to therapy was when I was in my grad program. And they're like, you need to do 5 sessions mandatory of therapy, because I went to be a clinician, to school to be a clinician. And I was like, I don't have anything to talk about. Like, I'm good. Like, what are we doing here? So the first time I met my therapist, I just started crying. She's like, yeah, you got to work on X, Y, and Z, like the relationship with your mom. And I was like blown away. I was like, I've suppressed all these emotions into, working 4 to 5 jobs, to not think about, feelings. And I think I want to segue into feelings, or steer into that, because I feel, and you all can chime in, the 2 feelings that are suppressed the most are sadness and anger. Because I think I grew up in a household where it's not okay to be sad, and it's not okay to be angry. And, I've worked in education for 8-9 years, and mental health, and you see a lot of these kiddos that it's like, no, that's a bad way to feel. Like, I don't want to feel this way because it's bad.
Right.
Like, I'm being a bad person because I'm angry or sad. And it's like, I just don't want to feel this way, instead of like, hey, you know what? I'm feeling really angry right now. Like, it's okay. It's valid. Let me sit with this emotion. So what feelings would you all say that you have suppressed, or you notice that are suppressed in the Latino community, or just in your career field?
I will say that kind of the opposite. For my family, I feel like we were always a happy family, always like, oh my gosh, like, you guys are so, this and that. I'm like, yeah, but I know you guys also see us getting into our screaming matches. And just, I think my mom is a very loud person, so, and I think anger and sadness is the number one way in how we communicated, which I know it sounds a little wild, but that was the only time I feel like I was heard, is when I was being loud, right? Even if that meant I got in trouble. Oh, estás rezongando. I'm telling you how I feel. Or like, I'm standing up for myself. So I feel like I didn't know a healthy way to be angry or a healthy way to be sad. I only knew a healthy way to be happy, and that's it. But forget anger. Like, I can't be angry or I can't be sad, because then that comes with the gut feeling of like, oh, I made you mad that I was angry, and it's my fault, right? So I think for me, and you know, you can be mad, you can be mad right now for 5 minutes, and then you have to get over it. So I think I had to learn as an adult, you know, how to regulate those feelings, and sometimes it feels like it's too late, but you do have to do that because it's for you, and you have to sit in it. And I would cry, and like my therapist would be like, why are you holding a pillow to your chest? You need to cry. You need to sit with your emotions. Emotions are a wave. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I just want to be happy all the time. You have to do that to evolve.
Right.
So.
Yeah, so I feel very similar to you. Anger is the only way, you know, you feel hurt sometimes as a kid, because like, oh, there's certain things that I'm bringing up kind of lightly, and it's like, all right, well, it's not that big of a deal. You don't seem like you're that passionate about it, until I'm crying and screaming and whatever else I'm doing as a little kid. And then it's like, where did this come from? Like, the parents, like, where did this come from? Why are you all of a sudden mad and yelling and crying on us? Like, and then you don't realize as a kid, like, I try to tell you so many times or express some of these emotions so many times that this is the only way it's going to come out. And growing up and being and learning to manage those, and like you said, it's okay to be angry. It's actually good to feel anger and to identify anger, right? It's just not good to explode on it and to let it completely control you, and to go off and end up in jail where I work. You know, it's very common. Right. And I think that's something that it does lead to a lot of these guys where I work. It's, oh man, I got mad, I saw red, and I did something really dumb. Yeah. And it all comes back to this, that guy had no way to express his feelings, probably because of the way he grew up, the community he grew up in, school system, all that stuff. No way to cope with being angry, this little tick off or a couple things that ticked him off, and now you're in the system or experiencing grief, you know.
Yeah. And I think we don't like look at regulating our emotions as we should, because when I was growing up, I was like, oh, it's fine. Yeah. And then like this past year, I was like, why am I getting so angry lately? Like, I can't even control myself. Like, what is going on with me? Yeah. So then I went to therapy, and she was like, okay, so we need to work on things. But sometimes you don't even know that you need those changes. So like we feel like regulating emotions is not that important. So I didn't learn that when I was a kid. So I was like, okay, I don't have anything to learn. But then as an adult, it's affecting my regular life.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. How have we engaged in those generational patterns? Because it took me to go to therapy to explore further on how my actions were so similar to how my mom's actions were unconsciously, right? So my mom, I grew up in a very verbally abusive household. They were just fighting all the time. And my mom, to kind of just, you know, wave out my dad, she would put the music really high. So I realized that in my first relationship, when we were arguing, I put the music really high in the car. And then my therapist is like, that sounds a little familiar, doesn't it? You know, or throwing things or yelling or punching stuff or laughing, right? And that's how I cope. I used to laugh, like very passive aggressive, but that's how my mom used to act during those arguments. And I was just so blown away. So have we ever engaged in that generational pattern unconsciously that we can think of? 100%. And I think we're all kind of, you're like, no.
100%. I will say yes. So I have, my parents live in Mexico. They've been living there for like a year and a half. So in my household lives myself, my 26-year-old brother, and my 19-year-old sister. My 19-year-old, she's kind of like my little daughter. We're very similar people. We're 9 years apart. I've always taken care of her. But I have seen myself be my mom to her. Not just because I treat her like if she were my daughter, but, you know, I see myself repeating what my mom did to me or said to me with her. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, I'm so sorry. So because I've learned better and I've seen those patterns and what it did to me, I am able to, you know, I will sit in front of my sister's house and sit her with me and like, you know, I'm so sorry that I talked to you like that, but it really makes me worried when you do these things, right? Or when you're not communicating with me, because I then take a moment and say, you know what, I don't want to do to her or make her feel how my mom made me feel. So it's important for me to have these conversations. And, you know, you try your best to not repeat those patterns, because you're like, I'm not going to be my mom. Like, I'm not going to do to my kids what she did to me, right? And so I try to fix those patterns. But sometimes it just, you know, it triggers you, but it triggers little you know? So it's like a double trigger, and you're like, oh, slow down. But, you know, we try to make those better every day. So.
Yeah.
Healing your inner child, right?
Yeah.
And you don't even notice it when you're doing something that is from your mom's or from your dad's, because I was my way to love is exactly the same as my mom's.
Yeah.
Exactly the same, but I didn't notice.
Yeah.
And then in therapy again, God bless therapy, my therapist was like, wait, so your mom did this and this and this, who else is doing it? And I was like, me? And she was like, can you see it? But until we have it in front of us, I was fine before that.
Yeah. There's no problems.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, so part of mental health, I think an important part is being honest with yourself, right?
100%.
Is keeping yourself accountable.
Yeah.
So for me, this is keeping myself accountable as well. So I live with my two little nephews, my brother and my sister-in-law, my parents, and one of them just turned 3, one of them's turning 2 next month. So they're little babies.
Yeah.
And sometimes they cry over the dumbest things. I'm like, and they just start screaming for no reason. I'm like, dude, you got to stop yelling already, because honestly, it's getting really annoying. And then I kind of catch myself, like, these little boys.
Yeah.
I gotta let them cry because they're mad, like, even if it's just about a little Cars toy, but like to him that's the biggest thing, or about this little monster truck. Like, it's so dumb. They have like 100 other ones, like, but why are you crying over this one?
Behavior's communication. Behavior's communication.
It is so, it's so
you need to have like a little emoji chart, like how are you feeling?
Right.
We're gonna send you something.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and sometimes I catch myself being like, dude, you gotta stop crying because you're being annoying and I don't want to hear you screaming right now. Other times I'm like, all right, so what is it that you're feeling? And obviously they're just learning how to talk, so they don't have a whole dictionary of things to tell me. But okay, like, let me give you a hug. I'll give you a hug. Come down to your level, looking at you in the eyes, those little like nonverbals that are really important for little kids, right, as they're growing up. And like, okay, you're gonna be okay. So what can we do about this? And starting that conflict resolution and like resolving things at a young age.
Yes.
For me, that's like how I'm practicing in my personal life. Try to all the time, but like I said, we got to keep ourselves accountable, because we can't be doing it all the time. Like, there's certain ways that we grew up or that are so ingrained in us that we have to really catch ourselves while we're doing it. And like you said, acting like your mom. For me, it's like my dad. And the funniest thing is I always said, I will never be like my dad. Yeah. Growing up, I'm not going to be like my dad. I don't like him. He's a jerk. He yells. He does whatever. Here I am in the same profession as him, doing the same things, and sometimes acting the same way as him. And you got to catch yourself, you know?
It's interesting, right? Do we feel like gender roles play something specific or different in mental health, if that makes sense?
Absolutely.
I'm going to say yes. I agree. I will just speak for myself, right? I think a lot of my students, especially them being so young, and those students that unfortunately, like, they do have that parent at home, but they're not very present or like mentally there. They're there physically sometimes, but you know, some of them are working, which I feel that, and that's an own battle of itself, but some of them are on TikTok or on Facebook and they're not there. So I think they look to me to be sort of a mother figure or an important woman in their life. And, you know, I'm there to be all the roles for them at all times. But sometimes I'm like, you know what? I know a mom should sit here and listen to everything, but friend, this just doesn't feel important to me right now, right? Like, you know, just like you said, like they lost their backpack or like, you know, things like that. I'm like, friend, I will go help you find it. Like, I know this is hard for you, but, you know, sometimes they do want you to fit all the roles. But, you know, for example, it is hard for me to run a boys group, you know, but I try to bring the nurturing side out for them so they're not missing anything, right? But do I wish that sometimes I had a male counselor there to talk to them about boy stuff, right? I do, but that gets kind of difficult sometimes.
Absolutely.
Setting those boundaries, because you already
Yes.
have all those roles that you play in your
Yeah.
career, but
Yeah.
at home as well.
Yeah.
You know, you're a daughter, you're a quote unquote mother. Like,
yeah.
when do you get to be you?
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
That is
You know?
when I turn into a dog mom and walk my boys.
There you go. But see, that puts you in
Yeah.
another role.
In another role.
Yeah.
And, you know, we talk about this all the time, especially like mental health professionals, you know, like when do you find your you time, and who is Rosita outside of this, you know? And I think even for this opportunity, it's also because this is Rosita. Rosita likes social media. Rosita likes talking to people that are like-minded, you know?
Yeah.
So I think this is what fills me. So this is a part of it. So I love that. Thank you.
So
I
how
love
do we
that.
find time for ourselves? Because
Yeah.
we're constantly in the helping field.
yeah.
We're pouring into everybody else's cup. So like Rosita said, like this is Rosita time. So let's talk a little bit more about that, because mental health, we talked about the stigma, we talked about the taboos, we talked about the cultural norms and societal beliefs. So how do you work on your mental health? Aside from therapy, because we know therapy is great, and therapy puts us on check. Like, oh, you got to work on this.
But you can be on therapy every day, the whole day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have to balance on your own.
Yeah.
Also.
It's so hard too, and just like we tell our patients, right? You have to find your hobbies, the things that allow you to escape from real life, what's going on in real life. And sometimes, man, it's so hard because your friends, like, you can't be a therapist all the time or a clinician all the time, but your friends know you as somebody who's going to listen to them, give them good advice, or even just like allow them to have that space. And there's sometimes, like, for me, I have friends that they call me on my drive home, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. I have nothing for you, because everything I just heard, because I work 10-hour days, everything I just heard for the last 10 hours, like, has been heart-wrenching stuff. I just don't have it in me, and I'm so sorry. I wish I could. And those are the times for me. Honestly, sometimes I lock myself in the room for like an hour when I get home, and my family knows, because obviously they know what I do and whatnot. Just lock myself in there. For me, it's music. I love music. So I'll go driving, put my music loud, or when I'm home, I like playing guitar, so I'll play guitar. For me, that's how I feel like just most of my stuff, when I'm able to express myself when not necessarily talking, because talking sometimes just gets draining. When you talk all day, it gets draining.
And those boundaries, though, I feel like, so I used to work as a clinical school therapist, and I would come home after like a heavy day, you know, transporting 5 kiddos to the ER because they were having suicidal ideation. And these kiddos are ages like 10 to 13. So hearing all these heavy things, you know, I would go home and I'm just like, I need 5 minutes. And my mom was like, ay, vienes de mal humor. You're in a bad mood. You don't want to talk. Like, ay, you don't have time for your mom. So it's like, how do you set those boundaries? Because we're talking about boundaries with friends, families, coworkers at work. So as, you know, me as a first generation Latina, how do I not people please, set boundaries, but make sure I'm taking care of my own mental health, right? So I love that you brought up boundaries, because it's so important.
Extremely.
And I think we're like, for me, my case is like being a pleaser.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's like something in general, but I'm like, no, I'm so tired. I don't want to do this, but like, it's my family. I need to listen to them. What are your problems? Like, tell me. And I have a lot of things on my plate. So that boundaries being like, you know what, like I can't right now. I have my own things. I can't be a pleaser all the time. It's definitely a way to like taking care of ourselves too.
I agree with that, because, you know, like you said, they know our profession, they want our help, and I get it. But I think also in the Latino culture, it's all geared like people pleaser. Oh, you can do this, or like, oh, todos ayudamos, todos hacen su parte, right? I get that, but like, just know that my parte that I'm doing is talking to kids all day, educating kids all day, talking to adults, explaining the same thing to adults, right? And that's my boundary. Or like, you know, I have a food service because I can't go home and go to the store and cook a home meal because I'm tired, right? I feel like an enchufe. The kids are just taking the energy out of me, right? So I have a food service. As soon as I get home, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you. I need to put the harnesses on the boys and we're going for a walk. Like, I need to be quiet. Don't talk to me. Like, I need to go. Or my sisters, like, I let them know, like, I had a long day. Like, can I tell you about the drama or no? Right? Or like, can you hear me about what I'm going to talk about? Yes or no? Or they'll tell me, like, they'll tell my parents, even my sisters, like, Rosita's been really stressed out lately. Like, can you just leave her alone or like give her space? Because they know that, okay, like if I'm at this point, this much stress, Rosita's gonna like yell at somebody, you know? So I think having that communication piece is major. And, you know, at this point, my sister, yes, she's older, but she's still young. Like, can you help me do this? Or like, can you cook the dinner for us? You know, and just having that balance because, you know, I wish I could do 100 things, but no se puede, you know? You got to do what you can when you can. And I think people pleasing is so ingrained in our culture. Like you said, it's time for us to live for ourselves. Like live for Rosita. What's gonna make 100%. Rosita happy?
And that's what breaking barriers is all about, right? Changing the stigma, changing the story.
I really like the point that you brought up, letting your support system know. For me, sometimes I try to make it a little bit funny. I'm like, can I just trauma dump on you guys real quick? Because I had a wild day. And then my mom's the best. She'll be like, yeah, tell us all the stories. And then I get it off my chest. I'm like, all right, I feel so much better just because I was able to come home real quick. I was able to get everything that happened off my chest that I just experienced over the last however many hours working. And now I could just, now I could be a more present son or uncle to my nephews, you know.
I feel it's also really important to know, like, just the empathy that everybody's going through something. Because sometimes we're like, I'm having this, and this. And then the person that we're venting, they're like, okay, I'm having my things too, you know? So not being mad because we can't take that much or like, it's just, we're all dealing through something. It could be good days, could be bad days, could be worse days, you know.
Pero we take it day by day. Ya se nos va a acabar el tiempo. Pero muchas gracias por venir. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation and part of the change, right? Because this is where it starts. You know, being vulnerable enough to talk about what we've been through and seeing others and universalizing that, you know what, we're not the only ones going through this. So, muchas gracias.
Thanks for having us.
Stigma too, right?
Sí, Elisa. Me encanta. Entonces, muchas gracias. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you have any topics you'd like us to cover, go ahead and put it in the comments. And again, April 4, our first annual Latino College Expo in Chicago. So talking about breaking barriers and stigma, this is huge. This is amazing stuff that we're bringing. So hasta luego. Again, my name is Bridget.
Thank you. My name is Elisa Fonseca.
And that's our Lección de la Vida for today. See you soon.
Bye.